Obviously, this movie is not the first adaptation of Frankenstein. Great book to adapt. As you pointed out, the 1931 adaptation was very different than the book. How come?
Yeah, so after I learned the massive differences, I decided to look into that because I'm fascinated at why people make the choices that they make in Hollywood. And the very short answer is, I think that the book would have been too expensive to adapt. When we're looking at possibly adapting books, and I talked about this a little bit with Moneyball, we want to sort of bring out the themes, but everything else is sort of up to the individual. When we're making this adaptation, they were thinking, we want to create a monster movie. We want there to be a monster. We're not particularly interested in telling a story of a creature who ends up being great at philosophy and who can read Dante's Inferno. We're interested in one location, something very easy to film. We build one set and we can yell, "It's alive!" And you think about things from a film sort of context and what's going to do well on film versus what is sort of true to the book. Now we have the ability, and obviously Guillermo del Toro can do what he wants. And so he wanted to do a faithful adaptation that takes place in many different locations, et cetera, et cetera. But in 1931, you're really just looking at like what's going to put butts in seats. All right, there's a monster. Let's make him monstrous. How do we get this down to one location? And so that's why the decision were made. It's a really interesting question, though, as to do you need to faithfully adapt something?
She's alive! Alive!
The answer is no. You don't have to. And it's not particularly all that fun to do. No Country for Old Men is one of the only faithful adaptations that I know of. Everything else, you do have to adapt to a new medium. So I'm not surprised that they adapted it the way that they did, but I'm also really glad that we did get a faithful adaptation in the end from Guillermo del Toro, because I think it's a much more interesting story of the narcissist and his son, the narcissist and his creation. It's a much more powerful theme to talk about fathers and sons than it is a monster. But when you ask people, what is Frankenstein about? Well, there's the real monster who's the scientist, and there's the victim who's his creation, and the townspeople are afraid of the unknown. That's the theme that we think of when we think of Frankenstein, is people are afraid of the unknown, and they end up burning it down. That's not at all true in the book. That theme isn't really explored at all in the book. It's much more about the relationship of father and son. It's a fine theme, but it's not a theme from the book.
Oh, you did a little Christopher Walken there.
It's a fine theme.
But and Jeff, remind me, do you think theme's important? I forget.
Oh, fuck off.
The other thing that the makers of the 1931 version of Frankenstein didn't have to deal with is they didn't have to deal with a bunch of rabid online devotees of the original source material, making sure that everything was done as faithfully as possible.
God, Josh, I feel so bad for Craig Mazin and trying to adapt Last of Us Season 2. And he kind of talked about it in advance. He's like, look, guys, I'm doing an adaptation here. We're going to do the best we can. But he just got lit up by the people who loved the game. And it's like, guys, the sequel game was not that good. So he needed to make some changes to it. And he didn't change it enough to make it great television, but he changed it too much that it infuriated the people who loved the original. That really fell kind of flat on its face. But it's like, adaptations are tough in the modern world where you have all these. No, Victor would have worn a pin on the right side of his jacket, not the left side. It's crazy. But also, you kind of want to piss those people off a little bit because they drive engagement. Nothing engages people like anger.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.